The air in the North Carolina mountains was thick with the freshness of pine and anticipation. The cozy Maple Leaf Cottage, nestled by the shore of a mysterious mountain lake, seemed like the perfect escape. It was a rustic place with a wood-burning stove, a couple of small beds, and a snug sitting area for breakfast. From its porch, an amazing view of the serene lake waters unfolded. Behind the cottage stretched the Spruce Horizon Mountain Resort, renowned for its exquisite food and entertainment. It was an ideal spot for a romantic getaway. However, Maple Leaf Cottage held a dark secret, a secret that would ensure Alex Mitchell and many others would never step foot inside it again. On a late afternoon on Valentine's Day 1998, Alex and Derek Mitchell, a married couple from a suburban Charlotte neighborhood in North Carolina, walked hand in hand towards their car. They had just dropped off their 8-year-old daughter Lila at a neighbor's house. Now, Alex and Derek had the entire weekend to themselves, and they were really excited about it because they had this big trip planned. Admittedly, Alex had no idea what they were actually going to be doing because Derek was the one who planned it. And he was obviously being very secretive about the details. He wanted this to be a surprise. So for weeks leading up to this weekend, Alex would often see Derek on the phone, presumably arranging whatever it was they were going to be doing. But he wouldn't let her hear what he was saying on the phone, muffling his voice or hanging up before she could come over and listen. Also, after these secretive phone calls, Alex would often see Derek writing all these notes down in his journal, presumably about whatever it was he was planning. The only detail Derek shared with Alex about this trip was, "Make sure you wear something nice." When the couple reached their car, Derek hopped in the driver's seat and Alex hopped in the passenger seat. Immediately after Derek had fired up the car, Alex turned to him and said, "Are you going to tell me? You going to tell me where we're going?" But Derek just grinned and said, "Nope, it's a surprise." Alex gave a theatrical sigh and sat back in feigned frustration. But inside, the way she was really feeling was just excited. It was so cool that Derek had put so much effort into whatever it was they were going to do. But also, Alex was seeing her husband was really making a big effort to make her happy. And this was kind of new, because lately their relationship had been really rocky. Alex and Derek had been married for 9 years by this point, and they were both very, very different people. Derek was a total homebody, kind of introverted, and Alex was the opposite. She was super extroverted and very social. But when they first met each other, it was actually their stark differences that brought them together. For Alex, when they met, she was in her early 20s. She had just dropped out of college, and her experience with men so far had been she would meet them at parties or bars. And at first it would seem like their relationship was great, but then invariably, these guys would just kind of move on and break Alex's heart. Derek was different. He was this huge guy, 6'4", a massive former football player, but he was totally a gentle giant. And as soon as he met Alex, she could tell this guy was different. He treated her with respect, was loyal to her, and really cared about her. And so they hit it off right away. And Alex very quickly became pregnant, at which point Derek asked her to marry him. And Alex didn't hesitate for a second. They were totally in love, and marriage to Derek had really been a stabilizing factor in Alex's life. She wound up going back to college and got her degree, which landed her a job as a surgical technician, which is what she did now. And Derek turned out to be just a fantastic father. And he wound up actually staying home with their daughter when she was a baby, so Alex could go out and work. Alex always thought it was funny when she would come home and she would see Derek standing in the doorway cradling this infant. But he's like this massive person, and so their baby looked like a toy. But unfortunately, over the last year, Alex had seen a change in Derek. He went from being a shy person, but a person who could go out and function in society, to a shy person who basically stopped going outside altogether. Derek basically refused to go out anywhere with Alex. He didn't want to talk to anyone. He didn't want to spend time with their friends or family. He just wanted to stay home and watch TV or hang out in the basement. I mean, it was pretty obvious he was depressed, but his introvertedness was becoming kind of stifling for Alex. So Alex approached Derek and said, "You really need to go to therapy to get better here. You know, I'll go with you, we can do couples therapy." But Derek refused. And so finally, right around this past New Year, Alex decided she had just had enough. She was totally unhappy. She did not feel like Derek was going to change, and so Alex told Derek that she wanted to get divorced. And when Derek heard that, he realized the gravity of this situation. He knew Alex was unhappy with him, but he did not know she was thinking about separating. And so Derek kind of broke down and begged Alex to give him another chance. Let him prove to her that he will change, that he wants this marriage to work. And Alex said okay. And so that was how Derek wound up planning this very secret getaway on Valentine's Day. This trip was supposed to be the start of their new and improved marriage, and Alex was really excited and optimistic about the future. After driving for about an hour and a half, Derek pulled off the highway and began following signs towards the mountain lake area, a picturesque part of North Carolina located about 70 miles away from their home. After driving for a few minutes, Derek pulled into the parking lot of the Spruce Horizon Mountain Resort. And as soon as he pulled into a spot and turned off the car, he clapped his hands and turned to Alex and said, "Okay, we're here." And Alex looked from her husband out to all the perfectly manicured grounds of the beautiful resort, and she smiled and leapt out of the car excitedly. Alex and Derek took each other's hands and marched inside to check in. And as they were checking in, the person behind the desk gave them glasses of champagne. And then after handing Alex and Derek their key cards, the receptionist told them that their cottage where they were staying was like the nicest property at the resort. Alex and Derek were totally pumped. They took their champagne and their room keys. They walked back to their car and then drove a little ways deeper into the resort to their cottage. It was Maple Leaf Cottage and it looked out over the water, and when they went inside, Alex was totally wowed. It was this rustic suite with a wood-burning stove in the middle and 2 queen-size beds and a little coffee table area for breakfast. It was perfect. And then, when Alex actually walked into this cottage, she noticed there was a card sitting on a table, and it looked like a wedding invitation. Alex was confused and looked over at Derek, and Derek just smiled and said, "Go check it out." So Alex walked over, and she grabbed the note and she began reading it. And as she did, she began to smile. The card really was a wedding invitation, albeit it was for a fake wedding, because it would turn out this was not just a random overnight that Derek had planned for both of them. Instead, he had purchased a romantic getaway package, which included this amazing cottage, but also a professional dinner theater performance that would be held on the resort grounds. Alex read the description of the dinner theater show on this invitation. It was a murder mystery called The Bride Who Cried, where the actors in the show would put on a whole fake wedding. And then at the end of the wedding, somebody would get killed, and the audience would need to figure out who did it. For an extrovert like Alex, an activity like this was perfect, and so Alex felt totally touched that clearly Derek had heard her, and the first thing he did to kind of win her back was to begin to do the things that Alex really wanted to do, which was really going out and having fun. And so after Alex finished reading the card, she turned and looked over at Derek. And Derek was kind of nervous because he wasn't sure if Alex was going to like it. And Alex, she broke into this huge smile. She walked over to Derek and gave him a big hug. And Derek, he was so happy, and he hugged her real tight right back. Alex and Derek would spend the next couple of hours sitting by their fire inside of their nice cottage, drinking their champagne and talking about the future and just telling stories and having a good time. And then around 7 p.m., Derek and Alex put on their nicest clothes and walked their way over to the area on the resort where this dinner theater was going to happen. It was in an event hall with a bunch of round tables set up for the audience. And so once Derek, Alex, and the other audience members all took their seats, the actors and actresses came into the room, and they were all dressed in their wedding clothes. There was a bride and a groom in a wedding party, and the audience was instructed to participate in the wedding as if they were wedding guests. And so the audience all stood up and they began kind of having this fake social hour of meeting all the wedding guests. And then Derek, Alex, and the audience members all took their seats and they got ready to watch the drama unfold. And Alex pretty much immediately was totally absorbed in this performance. She was so enthusiastic talking to the actors and talking to the other guests and really pretending like she was part of the wedding. I mean, she was having a blast. The play itself was about a groom who was in the mafia who was forcing his bride to marry him by threatening her family. The climax came when the groom stood up and gave a toast with his champagne. He took a sip and then fell down dead. Alex watched all of this with delight, but she kept looking over at Derek, hoping he too would be smiling and having a good time. But each time she looked at him, he was just kind of stone-faced and looking straight ahead, like he just didn't care, or he was totally disinterested. And then a couple of times when Alex leaned over and said, "Hey, honey, who do you think did it? Who do you think the killer is?" Derek basically just completely ignored her. It was like she wasn't there, and the play wasn't there. He was just totally zoned out. Eventually, Alex and a few other very enthusiastic audience members figured out the killer in the play was the bride's mother, who poisoned the groom. And then after this discovery was made, the play was over. As everyone got up from their seats and began to leave, Alex couldn't help but feel really annoyed with Derek because he was just so silent and not invested in this play. And it's like, we came all the way here, why aren't you at least pretending to enjoy this? But Alex also thought, Derek put a ton of effort into this weekend. He's clearly trying. I'm not going to start a fight. I'm not going to bring it up. And so finally, Alex just said to Derek, "Hey, why don't we go to the bar and get a couple of drinks, bring them back to our cottage, and just hang out there for the night?" And when Derek heard this, he actually smiled and said, "Okay, great, let's do it." And by the time the couple got back to the front door of Maple Leaf Cottage, they were holding hands again and laughing and telling stories. And they went inside and Derek put the beers down on the table. And then Alex said she was going to go in the bedroom and just quickly change into something more comfortable. And so Alex walked into the bedroom and shut the door, and Derek walked to the front door and turned the lock. 3 hours later, a man named Mr. Harrison, who was staying at the resort with his family, heard a commotion in the lobby. He heard people saying there might be a fire at Maple Leaf Cottage, and there could be somebody still inside. Mr. Harrison immediately turned to his cousin who was with him, and the two of them bolted outside and just started running towards Maple Leaf Cottage. As soon as they got to a place where they could see the cottage from a distance, they could see black, oily smoke pouring out of the windows. When they got up to the burning cottage, Mr. Harrison ran to the front door, but it was locked. He couldn't get inside. He screamed to see if anybody was in there, but there was no answer. And so Mr. Harrison and the cousin ran around to the back of the cottage, where there was a glass sliding door. And Mr. Harrison tried the handle, but it was locked. At this point, the cousin said he was going to run back to the resort and get a fire extinguisher. After the cousin ran off, Mr. Harrison turned back towards the sliding glass door and realized it actually opened on both ends, and he had only checked one side and found that side to be locked. But on the other side, which he was now noticing, it was obviously unlocked because it was open just barely. And so Mr. Harrison immediately opened it up and all the smoke began coming out. So Mr. Harrison dropped down to get a better look because down low the smoke had not fully settled. There was a bit of an air pocket right at the bottom of the floor. And so Mr. Harrison got down and he looked inside, and for a second he couldn't quite see anything. But then he noticed, in the middle of the bedroom right inside this cottage, he could clearly see somebody's feet. Somebody was on the ground. And so Mr. Harrison screamed that he was coming in, and then he opened the door the rest of the way, and he began low-crawling into the bedroom. And as he did, he was hacking and coughing from all the smoke. And so finally Mr. Harrison reached this person, and he grabbed their foot and he shook them to try to wake them up. But they weren't moving. But the fire was getting bigger and stronger. The smoke was getting thicker. Mr. Harrison was really starting to panic and was worried that he too would get trapped in here. And so he just grabbed this person's leg and began pulling them. And it was really hard, but he finally got this person back to the door. He couldn't quite get them over that lip of where the sliding door was, but right then, Mr. Harrison's cousin showed up, and the two of them were able to grab this person and get them out of the cottage. And this was the moment when Mr. Harrison finally got a look at the person he was just dragging out. And it was immediately clear to him that this person was deceased. Their face was basically gone. It was completely burned away. In the days and weeks leading up to this weekend, Derek really was taking secret phone calls and writing notes down in his journal because he was planning something very special. But he was not the only one with plans for this weekend. Here's what police say happened after Alex and Derek got back to their cottage following the show, and Alex went into the bedroom to change, and Derek went to the front door and locked it. A couple of minutes later, Alex came out of the bedroom wearing something sexy, and she looked at Derek and smiled and said, "Come on, get in bed, I'll join you in a second." And so Derek's like, "Great, my plan is working, we're going to reconnect here." He climbed in bed and he laid down. Then Alex, she walked over and got something out of her bag. And then she walked back over to the bed and she pulled out a syringe. And she stabbed it into Derek before he could do anything. And she injected him with something called succinylcholine. Alex had access to this drug from her job as a surgical tech. Succinylcholine is used to relax people's muscles during surgery, but if you give someone too big a dose, it can stop their breathing. This drug works pretty much instantly, which means Derek would have seen his wife stab him with that syringe, but then instantly he would have been totally paralyzed but fully awake and fully alive. And so as he was lying there, he would have seen his wife put the syringe down and then grabbed lighter fluid, and then walked over to him and calmly poured the lighter fluid all over Derek's face and chest. And then one of Derek's final images he likely saw before his lungs stopped working and he died was his wife striking a match and lighting him on fire. After lighting Derek on fire, Alex casually walked out the back sliding door. She shut it, leaving it open just a crack. And then she made her way to the resort lobby where she put on this big act about how her cottage was on fire, and she thinks her husband was still inside. Mr. Harrison overheard Alex say that her husband might be inside the cottage, which is when he and his cousin jumped into action. They ran to the cottage and ultimately found Derek deceased inside of the cottage. Ultimately, Alex never intended to give Derek a second chance in their marriage. She was already having an affair with a much younger man who was in the Marines, and she was just done with Derek. And so as Derek began telling his friends and family how he was going to make a huge effort to save his marriage, Alex was going around to her friends and literally openly talking about how she wanted to murder her husband. But nobody took her seriously. They thought she was just kind of venting and being kind of dramatic. But as soon as the news broke that Derek had died in this fire and Alex had not, people rushed to the police to tell them, "I'm pretty sure Alex had something to do with this." Alex was convicted of her husband's murder and she was sentenced to life in prison. It would turn out the primary reason why Derek was so secretive before going on this trip was he really wanted to be this unbelievably special, romantic, kind of like recreation of the couple's first date. And so what he was doing is he was calling all of Alex's friends and family members and asking them questions about things Alex liked because he wanted to incorporate all of her interests in this trip. And then after these calls, when Derek was writing in his journal, that was not just writing down like logistics of the trip, he was also writing down how much he loved Alex and how excited he was for their future and what they would build together as a family. I mean, Derek really believed they were on a path to reconciliation. But of course, that just was not the case. Subscribe to our channel and hear many more interesting stories.